I know early in your story, Ryan, you guys had taken some steps towards addressing this topic that didn't initially take off, that didn't go so well. And I think a lot of churches maybe fear that if we broach this topic and try to start a group or launch the ministry, like, what if it doesn't work or no one comes or it goes poorly? And so just talk us through that a little bit. Can you tell us about what you guys tried and what you learned from that initial attempt?
Yeah, so I think we had a culture where, at least from the front, we were willing to talk about this, and it wasn't all the time. And then, as we continued to grow as a church, we started like quarterly men's breakfasts, and it was in that environment where, like, we should talk about this. And we showed a video and tried to launch the Conquer series through a men's breakfast. We had about like 100 guys coming to a men's breakfast, and so we showed a video. And it was just kind of like, hey, are you addicted to porn? Like, you need to get help, sign up over here. And we had like 3 guys sign up. And obviously we know that statistically that doesn't match reality. And it just didn't work. I think that we had a culture, we were willing to talk about this, but didn't have a culture yet where people felt safe to go somewhere and get help. And so I think the thing we learned from that was, and I remember talking with Rodney specifically about this because this kind of overlapped when Rodney, you and I reconnected, and you were talking about what you're doing with Pure Desire and the writing of the book and all that. And I was like, well, we tried to launch like a Conquer series for men, and the way we promoted it was like this. And Rodney was like, like, who's going to sign up for that, dude? And so the lesson,
Yeah, it's like been there, done that, Ryan. Been there, done that.
yeah, the lesson learned was like, oh man, we got to lower the shame
Yeah,
way more. We got to talk about this, I think, from a holistic
Yeah.
perspective, that sexuality is a God designed thing and it's good, but it's distorted. And a lot of us, have distortions of that presently in our life. And all of us can relate to this. There's no one that this doesn't relate to. And we didn't have that language and that culture built out yet. So we had a culture of courage, I think, but we
yeah,
didn't have a culture of wisdom around this conversation. And so that is where I think we slipped up. We tried it. It wasn't like a failure per se, but it was like, yeah, that didn't hit the mark like we needed it to.
yeah. And Ryan, thank you for just making it a learning opportunity, not a shaming, but like we're just trying to figure things out.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and thank you for keep growing in that regard.
Yeah.
Uh,
yeah. So we did. After that, what happened was we tried to launch that class and it was struggling. It wasn't working very well. And Conquer was a resource we had available. Like, we had it, we could check it out to people. We referenced it for people. We said, go get this. But again, it still felt like, okay, we'll talk about this, but there's not really a thriving culture of actually growing in grace and getting help and hope in this area. And so I ran into Rodney at a ministry event, and he mentioned that he was transitioning and going to Pure Desire and was writing a book called How to Talk to Your Kids About Sex. And essentially, we started talking about that. And I think even some of my own story he put in his book, and then later asked me for permission about it.
Better to ask
And
forgiveness than permission, huh?
yeah,
yeah,
classic, but it's
yeah,
all good. It was a funny story about me talking to my dad, when I was awakening sexually. And anyway, whatever. It's in the book. So bottom line is, and it was awkward, but bottom line was, he was telling me that he's writing this book and that he has a seminar, like a training that he and his wife Tracy did, where they would come to churches and teach on sexual wholeness, but then invite everyone back to a parent training that night. And we're a growing church, lots of young families. It
right.
totally fit with like what we need and where we're at. So we invited them to come out, and he taught on a Sunday morning. It was very well received. Had his book available, and then I don't know, Rodney, over 100 people came back that evening. And
Yeah,
I think that was the breakthrough moment, to be honest. That was the breakthrough moment culturally for us as a church, where I think it was like, okay, this is something that we can talk about. This is something we need to grow in. And what happened there was seeds were planted that over the next year or two would lead towards handfuls of men in the church coming to meet with me saying, we've got to launch
yeah,
Pure Desire groups. We've got to
right.
figure out a way to do this. And so that connected again with a teaching series, and we can get into that, but of how we further were able to, I think, make this more
Yeah.
Yeah,
accessible and lower that shame and invite everyone to come and get educated and learn about this. And then the healing process begins.
Yeah.
Ryan,
Well, I want,
that's kind of my next question is why do you feel like I remember when Tracy and I came and I remember, the service and the parent training and all of that. Why do you feel like that was received so well? I mean, and what preparation do you feel like you guys did in leadership, to kind of make this a win for you guys?
Yeah, I think part of it's you. I think part of it's your story. I think part of it's you speaking the morning of. I think that was super helpful. I think you became a trusted voice to people of just where you've been and your own journey. And I think also just making it an event that people knew you're not necessarily raising your hand saying, I'm a sexual addict. I have unwanted sexual behavior. I need to go to this. It was like, hey, this is a sexualized culture and a sexualized world, and all of us can relate to this. And whether you're a grandparent, parent,
Right.
or a teenager,
Let's
come
help our
out to
kids and
this.
grandkids. Yeah.
It is. And so that what that does is it allows everyone to opt in.
Yeah.
And I just think that, we wish the culture was different, but the reality is not everyone's ready to opt in and say, yeah,
Right.
I am a sexual being and we need to have
Right.
conversations about sexual health. And so that enabled that. And I think that's why it was successful. I mean, practically, yeah, we had round tables and I think the environment was friendly and I think it was accessible and there's kids ministry and all the things logistically for pastors to think about. Don't make this like a dark shadowy event with no kids support and people sign up on a covert list somewhere. I think it was like
Right.
public, visible, and it was open to everyone and helping everyone realize that all of us have a stake in this. All of us
yeah,
need to care about this, and that
yeah.
that really helped us.
Right.
And,
Ryan,
and
it's the one statement I can say in church. Sorry, Nick. And where I say, how many agree we should not let porn be the sex educator of our kids? And every hand goes up, right? Even
Absolutely.
grandma, she doesn't know what that word means, but she's raising her hand. Doesn't sound good. But
Yeah.
and you lower the shame and education really, I think, is a great way forward to help in this arena.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyone that's heard Rodney and Tracy speak, or really anyone on our Pure Desire speaking team for that matter, it's really this heartbeat to say we want to normalize the conversation. We want to
Right.
move it from being, that problem that those people have, or the few of you, to just acknowledge, hey, we're all sexual beings made in the image of God as such, and we've been born into a fallen world that's impacted our sexuality. So we all need to
Yeah.
understand, to grow, to learn, and putting it in the category of discipleship or training or education or equipping, rather than in a lot of environments, it kind of gets left in the shadowy halls of addiction or, grief support and those things are appropriate, but it can kind of create this big hurdle of, well, I don't know if I need that.
Yeah.
Going back to what you said earlier about your kind of false start or the attempt that didn't work. I've talked with a couple of pastors that would say, well, yeah, we tried to start something, but it didn't work. And I'll say, okay, great. Can you tell me a little bit about what you guys did? And, one story was, well, we told people we were starting this class for sex addicts. And if that was you, to fill out the welcome card and drop it in the offering plate and we'd follow up. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
a lot of problems here. One, just to join the class, I have to be ready to admit I'm a sex addict, which most people that struggle don't put themselves in that category to begin with. They have to write it visibly on a welcome card, which, by the way, the person sitting next to them or around them in church may have no idea they ever need that class. So that's embarrassing. Then they put the card in the plate and they don't know who all is going to see it and who in the, how many office staff members will see my name on that card. Like, there are so many barriers that you just created. Even if there are a large number of people that really did need the class, signing up for it was just too big of a step. Or I heard another example where the pastor said, well, we had a couple that wanted to host it in their home. And so we just said, hey, if this, if pornography is impacting your marriage, show up at Joe and Julie's house Tuesday nights at 7. And no one showed up. And I'm like, I'm not surprised by that because probably a whole bunch of people don't know Joe and Julie, and going to someone else's personal home that you don't know is difficult. And C, most couples don't know about this. One of the stats that came out in the Barna report is asking people that do struggle with pornography that said, who knows about your struggle? And half of the people, 50% of those looking at pornography said, no one knows about my struggle. So at least half of the people that have this struggle, their spouse doesn't even know yet. So they're not showing up for the group. And even if it is causing an issue in the marriage, it is a really big step to go from, my husband and I arguing about it to my husband and I going to a group with other people. just the readiness factor there. And so I think in a lot of situations, it is that kind of first step can feel very embarrassing or shameful, or it's like there's this flashing red light of, this is the porn addict class, and if you walk through the door, you must have a problem.
Yeah.
And that's just not. Now, eventually there may come a point in a process where someone will acknowledge, man, I've got a pretty deep struggle and the help I need is significant. But where that gets acknowledged has to be in a very safe, confidential, private kind of manner, which isn't the best starting place usually for a church to launch a ministry. And so I just see so much wisdom and value in what you guys did to say, hey, this is for parents. We want to come and equip all of our parents. And then within that training, as I know what Rodney and Tracy do so well, they're able to say that, hey, if you want to help your kids, one of the best things you can do is to face your own story, is to help yourself. And then appropriately, you guys provided an opportunity to take that next step, which I know in some of your story as a church was to offer Pure Desire's introductory video series, Sexual Integrity 101. So I think that was the next phase for your church. You did a sermon series and offered Sexual Integrity 101, and you guys had quite a turnout. So how many people signed up? Did you expect that? And then how did you do a training like this with so many people in the room? How did it work?
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's what happened. So essentially after that, parent training helped us, I think, move the ball down the field further. And then I had someone come and meet with me and say, hey, like, we've really got to do SI 101. And I'm like, great, let's combine it with a teaching series. We were teaching through the book of Genesis. So we were going to be in Genesis 2. So we just mapped out this whole kind of focus on healthy sexuality for 3 weeks. From the pulpit as far as teaching. And then we also had a very brave couple in our church film a testimony, and they just shared their story. And so I was able to talk about this, have them share the story, and then give people a next step. Hey, sign up for SI 101. And again, we used similar language to how to talk to your kids about sex. It was like, look, this is the kind of thing that all of us are welcome to learn, to educate, to develop more understanding. And I just kept, I think, in that lane. And so, we had a tremendous response. We had over 120 people sign up and show up to SI 101. That was shocking.
What percentage of your church would that have been at that time, Ryan?
At that time,
of your adults?
That probably 20% of the church.
Yeah, coming to one class. That's pretty impressive.
Yep. Yeah, it was in our main auditorium, round tables. Use the video. We also knew at this point we were getting enough traction. We were the end game of SI 101 was we're going to launch Pure Desire groups out of this to be the sustaining support, for help and hope for people in our church in the area of sexual sobriety. So that was what we're able to do. That class was people stuck through it. There's always some attrition in class, but I think even like 6 or 7 weeks later, like 75 people were still showing up for it. And we were able to launch Pure Desire groups from that. That started, I think, with just 2 groups, a men's and a women's group. So we felt like that was our area to improve. Like the SI class was great, but we had a small initial, launch into Pure Desire groups. But then we did it again the next year, made some tweaks, and now I have like 5 or 6 different Pure Desire groups meeting consistently with, up to a dozen people in each of them. So that's been excellent, an excellent resource, an excellent source of hope and healing for people in our church.
Ryan, I like that you're kind of taking the resource of Pure Desire and you're using it that best serves your community. Like I know you did it like, Tuesday nights or whatever for 5 weeks or 8 weeks. But I also know you did it on just a weekend. Like you just had a weekend gathering. A lot of people came for the weekend, went through the whole series, and then out of that launch. So just respecting people's time and,
we did it both ways.
Yeah.
The first one was like 6 weeks. And then we tried it the next year or the next season, and we did it like a conference. We kind of did it on a Friday night and Saturday and had food and tried to kind of, because again, our goal was, hey, we probably aren't going to get the same buckshot, everyone coming as that first launch, but we really want to get people into groups. That's really the end game. And so, that was a successful, I think, adjustment and helping it fit for us.